Hello, and thank you for joining No Wrong Choices, the podcast that explores the career journeys of interesting and accomplished people in pursuit of great stories and actionable insights. I'm Larry Samuels, soon to be joined by my co-hosts Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. But before we kick off, I have a very important request to make. Please support the work we're doing by following No Wrong Choices on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and by giving us a good review. We also ask that you connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X, and by visiting our website at nowrongchoices.com, where you can learn more about us and the show while signing up to become a member of our community. Your support enables us to bring these great stories to light. Now let's get started. This episode features the intellectual property trial lawyer Paul Keller. Paul is a super interesting guy who is keenly focused on technology and forward-looking ideas such as AI, self-driving cars, and cities of the future. He's also the host of the podcast And Motion. Tushar, you brought Paul to us, so you have the responsibility of setting up this conversation for us.
No problem. Paul and I went to school together, went to Fordham together many, many years ago, but we lost touch over the years. I've always known Paul, went into the law. I've obviously have friends who have known Paul for many, many years. And when we reconnected and we got to talking a little bit, I actually really got into what he's doing these days as an IP lawyer. And essentially what that means is that he is looking at a lot of like forward-thinking technology today, whether it be autonomous vehicles and not just like, your Tesla that you're driving, but things along the lines of like construction equipment or buses or how you set up cities. And then, as you said a moment ago, AI as well. Right? So, like, how these things will all essentially benefit our lives down the line. It is fascinating when you just have a conversation to speak to him when we're not speaking to him as a group. And I can only imagine what this conversation will be like when we speak to him as a group.
Yeah, this is our first lawyer, I think, on the show, right? So, but this is very unique, portion of the law that's not, your normal court drama, et cetera. But I love lawyers in general. I find them fascinating. I think you're all going to find this conversation quite fascinating because of what Tushar just said. It's about, the future and patents and, things that you don't normally think about in your day to day. So this is going to be a really cool conversation.
Absolutely. And Paul has a big job. He's responsible for helping bring ideas to life. So it's going to be really interesting to hear how he does that. So with that, here is Paul Keller. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so once again, as we normally do on this show for a lot of our guests, full disclosure, Paul and I went to college together back at Fordham many, many moons ago. And actually, Paul and I kind of lost touch for many years after college, and it's something I deeply regret. Paul and I were very fast friends in college. I really regret us losing touch. I'm so glad you're able to join us here. And the fact that we have been able to even, just kind of touch base here and there and just find out what's going on in our lives, I've been very excited about that. All right, so Paul, I know you're going to say, oh, thank you and all that stuff in just a second, but I also want to make sure I touch on this. Years ago, I ran into you on the street, and I think you told me that you were a patent attorney at the time. I was coming back from another gig. I kind of ran into you on the street, and I said, hey, so what are you up to? And you said that you were a patent attorney. Now, what you didn't tell me is that you're actually in IP at Crowell and Mooring. So, for our audience, what exactly is Paul Keller doing these days?
Thanks for all that, Tushar. That's a pretty big wind up for me. So I really appreciate that. It's been great catching up with you as well. Absolutely. And the fact that we haven't caught up with each other is probably all my fault. So I apologize. It was probably after you hit me, you threw me to the ground and I couldn't get up for a little while. But,
I blame Tushar.
We haven't spoken to each other in a long time. I was like, who the hell are you?
Nice.
Get up, fool. So I think, back then, I can't remember exactly where I was in my legal career, but I've been a patent litigator my entire professional career. And so there is something different about being a patent lawyer and a patent litigator. For some inside baseball here is patent lawyers. We refer to them as the folks. These are the folks who go to the patent office and work with clients to negotiate the terms of the patent, kind of get the patent out of the patent office. It's called patent lawyering or patent prosecution. Sometimes that's called. So I do patent litigation, patent counseling, patent monetization strategies. I am primarily that's what I do. I do the other IP rights as well, the trade secret rights, is probably my next biggest bucket. Trademarks, copyrights becoming even more important as the AI world evolves. But I have been doing that IP world work now for some number of years, and it's been. How did I get into it? It's kind of a weird story actually. As you sure you know, went to undergrad at Fordham. Majored in economics, almost minored in biology. That's my for a lot of your listeners say, oh well, he's a bio guy. He's a hard scientist, so that's probably why he got into patent law. But the biology I did was like the biology of beer and the chemistry of wine. So that was a totally different.
Yeah, like the rest.
I like that kind of chemistry and biology.
It really worked out. It really worked out, and the Jesuits were on board with all that behavior, so it was fine. But I went to law school at Cardozo Law School here in New York City, and really thought I was going to be a corporate guy. One of the titans of the industry, the universe, the masters of the universe, that whole spiel. This is around Wall Street years, and so everybody
real life Harvey Specter. Yeah. That's who you were going to be.
Well, no, that's a litigator. I was going to be, who I was going to be. I was going to be whoever Martin Sheen played or Charlie Sheen played in Wall Street, the movie. I was going to be that.
Okay.
Preferably without going to jail and doing all the bad things that he did in the movie. Right. But I wanted to do that kind of stuff. And I have a sister. She's a tad older than I am. She also went to law school. She suggested out of nowhere, Paul, listen, we got 3 years here to see what you want to do. Sounds like corporate law is the way you're going to go. But on a whim, just find a course, look through the course book. Back then it was actually books, and see if anything interests you in that catalog, in that curriculum. I looked through the book, and copyright law caught my eye. Professor Marcy Hamilton was teaching the course at the time at Cardozo.
Your sister was going to Cardozo at the time?
No, she was at Pace. She had finished up at Pace.
Okay.
In White Plains. So I was in the city, but took copyright law and really, really enjoyed it in a way that it was clearly going to change my life. And so went on to do advanced copyright law. I did advanced trademark law. I actually never took patent law in law school. And that's just the whims of fate, but ended up taking those experiences, getting very much involved with the school's Arts and Entertainment Law Journal, which you consider like the one right below the Law Review. Became the editor-in-chief of the AELJ, and then got a job in a very well-known patent litigation law firm in New York City. It's since gone, but it was one of the titans of the industry at the time, called Fish and Neve. And I think that's where you threw me to the ground.
That's probably where we met. That's probably when we kind of ran into each other.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I've never looked back. It's been a fantastic experience. It's been great. It's really, really been a great career, and I've really enjoyed it.
So I get one of the most fun parts of this, and you've already answered it for the most part. So it's safe to say this was not the dream. So what was the dream? You already mentioned you grew up in New York, so in and around that area. So what was a young Paul Keller dreaming about as a child? What was it originally going to be?
Well, I had it pretty easy. So I grew up in the Catskill Mountains of New York State. Yeah. I was born in Buffalo, lived in Ithaca for a while, grew up in Monticello, New York, about 2 hours northwest of the city. I knew at a very young age that law was going to be a thing for me. Back then in public school, you had work like wood shop as a thing in fifth grade, or you did some woodworking. And I remember doing a print block when I was in fifth grade that said Paul Keller, either an at law or for law, whatever it was wrong. It was the
attorney
wrong,
at law.
That's what it said. It said PK at law, and it had the American flag on one side and the Capitol building on the other. And I really didn't know what lawyering meant back then, but I probably had a mouth on me already. But I knew at fifth grade that I wanted to do law. I just knew that. So the challenge was, okay, one, what is that? What am I going to do with it? I had no idea what I was going to do with the law, and clearly no idea what it was going to take from fifth grade through college to get me there. And I kind of figured that out along the way. But I was blessed with knowing at fifth grade that the law was going to be in my future.
So, Paul, beyond woodshop and getting the vision and creating the nameplate and everything else, who was Paul Keller? Meaning, were you driven? Were you ambitious? Were you a big personality? Like, what were some of the other character traits you had that kind of pushed you out into this path?
It evolved. It evolved, to be sure. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I was a very normal kid. I ran and I jumped and I played and I biked and I swam and all that normal stuff. There wasn't really much to me. Middle school was very much the same. I think around middle school was the time learning a lot from my sister, really. She was very active in the high school debate team when I was in middle school. And so I got a chance of seeing that and kind of getting excited about that a little bit. And so when I got to high school, when I had been exposed to that a lot, so saw what many people don't even recognize that happens in their high schools is their debate team and what's called the National Forensics League. For many families who don't participate in that, debate is kind of this dark arts that are happening behind closed doors that nobody really understands, or it's a club. And it's like, it's a club, like chess club or something. Even the chess clubs, when they go on to nationals, normal other people who are not involved have no real clue about the rigors of what happens there. And the debate team in Monticello High School was a nationally ranked organization. It was the most highly funded, quote unquote, club in the school, far surpassing any sports team. So when I got to high school, I knew I was going to be a part of the debate team. And that probably polished off the public speaking, gave me confidence to stand up in front of people, gave me confidence to speak my mind in front of a large group of people. Learned very early on that I might not be right when I'm saying in front of these people, but boy, I better say it in a way that makes them think I'm certain. And that went a long way to people back then, maybe still does. But that went on to my sophomore year where I began to develop some of those leadership skills, leading to me becoming the president of the student body for my senior year. And so it was that evolution of me that was very pronounced from freshman year to senior year, me being very active with the community, very active with school clubs, very active in sports. And so it was with that rather exhausting 4 years where Tushar got to meet me as a freshman at Fordham. And he's like, I was completely exhausted and took a little bit of time off really at Fordham to kind of recuperate. But it was foundational. It was very foundational. All of that was very foundational.
Your parents, what did they do for a living? Because, I mean, the idea of you saying that as a child, well, I'm going to be a lawyer, like, I had said the same thing as a kid, and that was only because most of the men on my father's side of the family are in law of some sort, right? So for me, it was like, okay, this is the family business. We go into law. What about you? What about your parents?
Yeah, I didn't have that experience. So my mom was a kindergarten teacher, public school teacher. My father was also in education, turned to the library sciences and did more on the college side, university side of librarians. My grandfather, who passed away when I was very young, this is my mom's father. He was a lawyer, but didn't really practice. He was very much involved in business, and so he ran a number of car dealerships. He actually started a few radio stations, one of them which is now the student radio station in Syracuse, New York. So lawyering was not around. It was like inundated. Like, this is the family business. I just need to go. In fact, if I had to follow in the family business, it probably would have been teaching.
Right.
Which both sides of our family were teachers all the way back. So I don't know if it was LA law back then. I don't know. I really don't know. There was some politics. I thought about that for a second. That I got turned off to that. I'm not really sure how and when that happened, but it was more just me thinking this feels right.
Did you like the argument? Did you like to present a case and just see it through and argue? Or is it just bring people to your side? Like, what was the exact appeal?
It's a great question. Back then, I actually think it was probably, it wasn't so much just the arguing for arguing's sake. It was more of the entertainment value of what was happening here.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed getting up in front of people and talking to them. And certainly with my the student body president and the clubs I was involved with, we had goals. We had fundraising goals. We had membership goals. We had things we wanted to do in the school. And I really enjoyed talking to people and inspiring them, or hoping to inspire them to kind of come with me on this journey. Let's get from point A to point B together. We can do it together. We're going to have fun doing it together. We're doing it. It's going to be serious. There's going to be serious stuff that happens here, but we're going to laugh along the way. I really, 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 really enjoyed it. And so,
And that was the high school version of you.
that was the high school version of me. That continues to today. And that helps me in the law, I think, is
I'm sure.
there are plenty, and I've lawyers New York litigators have a certain reputation around the world, and I can fill that mold, live up to that expectation at the drop of a hat, no question. And that's an unfortunate part of our business, where the tenacious, down in the dirt, bulldog approach sometimes is required to help parties resolve their disputes. And that's just an unfortunate reality of the business. But many other times, the business solutions, the we can figure this out, whatever else is driving the dispute can be resolved yes, using the legal process does not require scorched earth and boiled ocean all the time. And so I bring a lot of that. Let's march let's march in a certain direction. My client will get there first, but over the course of the case, your client's going to get there too, because frankly, the arguments and the facts and the theatrics of it all is just, your guy's going to lose.
I mean,
Sorry.
To that end, you're bringing it up now, so let's just go there. I mean, one of my real questions is, is it better to resolve it and come to the table and figure it out before you get to litigation? Because then it's kind of taken out of your hands a little bit. It's like, well, I had all the control before, or 50% of it, and now you're giving some of that up to a litigation process. You want to solve it before you get there.
As a New York litigator, the answer, of course, is that's completely wrong. You always want to fight. Of course, that's right. I mean, these are with IP litigation, patent litigation, trade secret litigation. You are normally dealing with very sophisticated players who have businesses to run, who are fighting tooth and nail for market share and for recognition in their industry. And so to have litigation as a rather significant time and money distraction, 99% of the time doesn't really help them. And you're there because the parties just haven't figured out a way through the problem. And with patent infringement, it can happen both on a local, national, and now international scale. That the path towards amicable resolution sometimes is very tricky and requires the hard hand of a Keller to come in and say, no, you really need to talk. You really need to come and let's figure this business solution out. And that's, I've enjoyed that in many ways, but it's a reality of American business. It really is.
Larry took us on down a rabbit hole, and I'm going to keep us there for one more moment.
Sure.
So, I've been a business person for a very long time and seen a lot of different things along the way. One of which is litigation and patents and things of that nature. And it seems like the big company always has a massive advantage over the small company that is trying to break into a new space. So, as an attorney, how do you support the small business that's trying to break through, that doesn't have the funds and the resources to keep up with the Goliath who can wait out a process, so to speak?
Yeah, there are actually a couple facets to your question, and I think you're probably focused on one of them a lot more than the others. I'll talk about I think what you're talking about, and then I'll scratch the surface of the other and see if you're interested in that too. But yes, certainly a well-funded, well-seasoned player versus the opposite of that will have a number of great advantages as they move forward in this. They are better prepared. They know about the distractions to come. They've got the money to do this and all of that. And so it is a challenge for a newbie when they get sued or feel like they need to sue. There's a lot of trepidation there that takes place there. The system itself, the patent law system, is rather well balanced in most places around the United States. There are some jurisdictions that people argue are more patent friendly for particular reasons than others, and vice versa in some other instances. But the law itself is rather well balanced of trying to protect the innovators for what they've innovated and the alleged infringers that, we're not just accusing infringers because it's fun and we can easily capture people who are actually not infringing. That system is rather well balanced.
Got it.
So the law is well balanced. And then the question becomes, okay, the resources and mentality. And the reality is today, maybe more than ever before, one, it is very expensive. It is very expensive to pursue patent litigation in the United States, trade secret litigation in the United States, very expensive. But there is a rather robust, there's a contingency industry that's available in the United States, and there's also litigation funding that's available in the United States. And clients and their lawyers discuss the benefits, the pros and cons of those other approaches, and decide what makes sense for them. And in some instances, the little guy says, I don't want to sue because it's all the other distractions are too much. But
right.
Those opportunities exist more than ever before that help smaller, less funded companies kind of do what they think it needs to be done against the larger companies. And that's it. That's I think where your question was really going.
That's exactly what I was asking. Okay. That's super helpful.
Well, there's another part of that, which is, and you've seen a little bit of this in the news over the last couple decades, half a decade maybe, is this concept of efficient infringement. That larger companies will proceed to infringe other parties' patent rights, and will do so because the likely profit that they will earn, it's almost like bean counting. The likely profit that they will earn from the infringement, combined with the risk of litigation and risk of loss, is greater than what the likely outcome of the case will be. And so that has been discussed now in the industry for some time. There's been a lot of articles on it trying to assess that. And that's, companies will play that game as best they can or pursue that strategy as best they can. I've got some thoughts on that on both sides. But that is an issue that our industry, the patent infringement industry, needs to continue to think about.
All right, so let me. I don't want to continue down this, but I do kind of want to ask for an example, and then one obviously that won't infringe upon something that you're working on. But this notion of what you had just spoken about a moment ago, the idea of infringement of patents. Give me an example of something like that we might recognize from like the news or something like that.
Oh well, there's plenty of battles that are been in the news about this. You've heard about the Apple versus Samsung.
Okay.
Phone fights. Like for example, that's one example. But there are thousands and thousands of patents out there. But patents are, for most people, they think of it in terms of technology. They think of the computers, the mobile phones, GPS systems, pharmaceuticals, these technologies and innovations that the inventors, the innovators, believe they're entitled to what is a government granted monopoly.
Right. And
that is called a patent. And it's all around the world. They're geographic in scope. So a U.S. patent only protects things that happen. There's some exceptions to this, but they're U.S. Quarantine.
Sure.
And an Italian patent will be an Italian quarantine. Right. But that's what we're talking about. And when you infringe these things, a patent is a long document, usually. It's got a lot of technical information in it, and it ends with what are called claims. And I think that's an unfortunate name for what they're called, because people talk about claiming this and making claims and kind of like allegations. I claim that you committed a tort against me, and those kind of things. These claims in a patent are actually kind of like the property line for your home. They're the meets and bounds of your property line. And if you are found to have crossed over what is maybe public into the meets and bounds of your property, you can be found infringing the patent, and all these bad things can happen as a result.
All right, so let's get away from the hardcore talk here a little bit. Okay, so your time now when I finally meet you, let's go to when I met you in Fordham, all right, and our freshman year and whatnot. Obviously, you took some time off from wanting to be in student government and maybe doing some of the debate club. Although I think you did do debate in Fordham, didn't you?
I did not. I did not do debate. There was so you're absolutely right. In terms of my freshman year, I took a breath from all the stuff that was happening in high school, and it began to again ramp up as I got to senior year, where I was not involved in debate. I did do a lot of Model United Nations
That's it. That's
work,
it.
and then I did the if you recall, some of our friends, Artie the One Man Party, and another group, they put together like a student court.
That was the
That
other.
aimed
Okay,
at-
yes, that was the other thing.
Remember
I
that?
thought you guys
Yeah.
were doofuses for doing that, but yes.
Nice.
But when you say doofus, I mean you say it kind of not in the way I would say doofus. I say you were such doofuses, meaning that was really cool and you're doing some pretty interesting stuff. That's how I
No,
take
I mean
that.
it as you guys were doofuses.
As Tushar was playing the trombone in the corner.
I think it was only the mouthpiece actually that he was practicing on, but that got very serious at the end of my college career. Is doing those two things. That was a lot of
So
fun.
you continue to basically want to build an argument throughout college. I mean, obviously you're going to be a lawyer. You knew you were going to be a lawyer, so the idea of even taking a break for a little bit was simply to give yourself a little bit of room to once again just build the argument, so to speak.
Well, it wasn't. It's. I have found personally that I tend to gravitate towards trying to help people solve their problems. You see people struggle in leading an organization, or you see people struggle in they're being encountered with a challenge from administration, from a teacher, from another student, from parents, whoever it might be, from some adversary, and they're struggling with solving that problem. They're struggling with standing up for themselves and figuring out how to resolve and how to address it. And for whatever reason, whatever DNA glitch that took place, the drop on the head, whatever happened there, where I don't seem to be wrapped up in I'm very comfortable in standing up. I'm very comfortable in speaking. I'm very comfortable in sometimes putting people at ease. That does not scare me at all. And so I found myself kind of just naturally gravitating or being put in positions where I got to do all that. And I can't seem to escape that and really don't want to.
That's excellent. So that's perfect segue to bring us back to that exercise that your sister gave you, because now you're really trying to like fine tune and hone in on exactly what it is that you want to accomplish in this field. So relive that exercise with us, because that was a really valuable tool that she has you looking through a book and really deciding like what strikes a chord.
Yeah, and that it was life changing. It was life changing. And something I think it was very wise words. And the just the approach of thumbing through the catalog and reading through some things. And I like to think that I didn't settle on copyright because it was so early in the alphabet in the curricula there that I didn't get the M's or N's. But it sounded really interesting, and it was really at that time it was focusing a lot on music rights. There was a lot of parody work that was going on back then in the music world, and Napster was, kind of not even a thing yet, but there were whispers about it. The internet was still, kind of still percolating around, but it's whatever it was, it struck a chord. It seemed different than, kind of, I don't mean to belittle it, but kind of humdrum contract law, where the rules are relatively well known. Copyright law felt like it was still very much moving and evolving and changing, and I was going to learn about that, and that was very exciting to me and proved to be such. I mean, these are rights that are in our Constitution. You don't go to the Constitution and think about contract rights. That's not there, but you do have copyright and patent rights that are specifically delineated in our Constitution. And there was something about all of that. I said, I got to check this out, and really enjoyed. But Marcy Hamilton, if you ever listen to this, a true inspiration, a great professor at Cardozo. Couldn't have made it more enjoyable for me to learn that subject from her and with my colleagues there at Cardozo. And I couldn't stop learning about it. And patent law I didn't take only because the course wasn't offered as often as I needed to be. I didn't realize I was going to take patent law or needed to take patent law until in my third year, and by then the rotation of patent law had passed me by, so I didn't get a chance to take it. But when people ask me, and maybe I can start up, you can ask me another question. But people ask me like, what advice do you have for me?
Yeah.
Fordham. I'm on the board of visitors at Fordham, and there's a pre-law program that Fordham has. I'm sure a lot of graduate schools have them too, and they bring people in from industry to talk to the students there to give them advice. And God help them, they've invited me over a couple of times to share my words. And so one thing I have told them is, just like I did, you got to trust your gut sometimes, regardless of what people are telling you, regardless of the brand name of this or that, regardless of this course that you had so set in stone for yourself. You might meet someone, you might find a mentor, something might spark your interest. It is too long a career for you not to act on it. I mean, there's a reason why it said the practice of law. You're practicing it every day. You're practicing it throughout your career. And if you're practicing something you're not passionate about, it's going to be very challenging. I was horrified when some of my colleagues from law school, they would go to, a very well-known firm, they get paid a lot of money, but they weren't passionate about it. 3 or 4 years later, they're out. That's really horrifying. That's sad. And I don't want that to happen. So that's it. There's the way. I'm done. That's all my wisdom that's I can offer you. I'm just going to take a nap now. I'm done. I'm done.
It's a good show, everybody. Have a good night.
Well, that's how we typically end, but that's good. Paul, I'm curious about, like, we had a heart transplant surgeon on last season, and the process that he went through to learn that skill and that craft and to become one of the best at one of the hardest things on earth was pretty intense and pretty mind-blowing. And, as we're talking, I'm wondering about the day-to-day of a college student without, going too deep in. Like, what's the intensity level of law school for a student?
It's pretty intense. You've heard, I'm sure you've heard this adage by others. I don't know how many lawyers you've had on this program, but the old adage of the first year they scare you to death, the second year they work you to death, and the third year they bore you to death. And there's, in very rough ways, that's somewhat accurate. But I remember, I was not working in law school. I had all the government loans I could possibly load up on, so I was able to focus on school. And it was from my apartment on Roosevelt Island the first year to school, library, and back. There was not a lot of fun time. I knew that going in. I knew that it was going to be intense. And so the fact that it was intense didn't really surprise me. But I think for others, they were a little shocked. They were like, whoa, this is not like undergrad anymore. But even with that intensity, kind of with that known, acknowledged intensity, with all that it was going to take, I failed my property midterm exam my first year. And I knew it immediately. I left that exam, maybe it was October of that first year, and I walked out from that exam and walked into the stairwell of Cardozo Law School and broke into tears.
Wow.
I can't believe I'm sharing this in this public setting, but I was shattered that I had, with all the things that I had accomplished and all the work that I had done, that I was so not prepared for that test that it just shook me to my core. And so that was I think it was a Friday, or Thursday. It was very close to the weekend, so I had the weekend to kind of collect myself. And I remember very early the next week shaking all of that off and saying, "Okay, kiddo, I mean, you got to pick yourself up now." And I approached each of my classes in a very, very different way. Graduated in the top 15% of the class. Named the editor-in-chief of ALJ, the Arts and Entertainment Law Journal. But it took that moment to wake me up to the reality that, no, you think you're studying in a sense way. No. This is what needs to happen.
Was that the first test you'd ever failed?
No. Well, certainly not.
I'm not talking about like when we're back in grade school. We screwed up on the times tables here. I mean, like a legitimate test in high school slash college.
No, high school. No, I mean, no. I was. We're all overachievers, right? So we're all, got the 3.5 or aboves and all the blah 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 blah. And you went to college. Now I didn't graduate with 3.5 or above from Fordham. I think some of my taking it easy the first and second year maybe caught up with me a little bit, but it was with honors, and I appreciated that. But it did not prepare me for. So no, the answer is no. Yeah, I did not fail any exams in high school that I recall, and I don't remember. I certainly didn't fail any in college, and I'm that's great, but I needed that failure in law school to put some to kick my butt to get me up where I needed to go, and it worked. Oh, and Stuart Sturck was that professor of property, and he's going to listen to this and he's going to smile because he's like, yeah, I remember Kelly.
So, Paul, during your time in law school, did you intern at a law firm as well? Did you at least get an idea of what it meant to work in a law firm?
I did not. So my experience with Cardozo, taking a step back here, I'll give you a little bit of a wind up on my experience with Cardozo. So I was applying to a variety of law schools in the New York City area, far north of Syracuse to St. John. I didn't leave the New York State area, but I'm Fordham, of course. But I visited Cardozo, and interviewing was a thing back then that we do, and I interviewed with the admissions director at Cardozo, and we had a great time. There was no question we were enjoying each other's company. But she, at the end of it, said, "Would you like to meet the dean of the law school?" And I, of course, being as sarcastic as I could be back then, said, "No, why would I ever want to do that? Of course I want to meet the dean of the law school. Are you kidding? What a great opportunity! Absolutely. When can I do that? Well, his office is right across the hall. How about we just step in? I'll let you wait for a while while I go get him." So this is Yeshiva University's law school. I grew up in the Borscht Belt of Catskill Mountains. I'm very familiar with that environment, and I'm certainly very different from the Jesuit environment at Fordham. But I go into the Dean's Law School, and there is a crucifix on the wall that's bigger than me. There are Paul Cézanne books all over the place. I am back at Father O'Hare's office at Fordham in a way I couldn't imagine. What is going on in this? And in comes a gentleman who I came to know as being Frank Macchiarola, who was big in New York City politics back in the day, and was the dean of the law school at the time, and very much a Roman Catholic, and knew about the Fordham traditions. He was explaining to me and walking me through the Yeshiva traditions and how, frankly, similar they were. And we really hit it off, the two of us. And we started negotiating my financial package in that meeting. And before I left, I had shaked on the deal to go to Cardozo.
This is Paul Keller to a T right here.
That's a heck of a meeting.
It was great. I had a great time with it. So, but I also worked with him both summers. So he was he was, I wouldn't say administrative law judge. He probably was an ALJ both summers. And so I worked with him to deal with some of the cases that he was handling over the course of the summers. Some of that was naiveness. I just wasn't as aware of what one should do during the summers. And so when he offered very early to help him out, and he was offering good money, and I just took it, and I just absolutely took it. So I didn't summer anywhere. And I've got another good story for you about how I got my first job. But when I did get offered my first job, it was actually between Fish and Neve and being an Air Force Judge Advocate General for the Air Force.
You're going to be a JAG.
I was going to be a JAG, of all things. And the JAG opportunity was really one that I wanted to try a lot of cases. I wanted to use that process, get a military background for all the things that offers, what are all the doors that opens up, and try cases. And I found out the first opportunity I was going to have with the JAG was not going to be trial based, and then Fish and Eve came through with their offer, and I really enjoyed that experience and the interviews with them and the people there, and so I chose Fish and Eve.
And what is the life of a person who has just joined that firm, and do you get to see your friends for the next several years afterwards?
I did. I certainly did. I was thrilled to be at the firm. I was very lucky to be there. It was a series of very weird coincidences that got me there. I took it as just like I knew law school. I knew going into law school that it was going to be incredibly challenging and a lot of time devoted to it. And I knew that 100% when I went to the law firm. And so I dedicated myself, and having never taken patent law, rather concerned that I'm going to go to this patent boutique firm as my first step in my career. And so knew I had to hunker down and really apply all my post-failing midterm learnings to Fish and
Right.
Eve, and did that. And it was, at that point, it was, Fish and Eve was probably one of just a few of the pillars of the patent bar at the time, late 90s. Very well known. I mean, magnificent lawyers, and what a phenomenal training ground for young pups like me. And so, yeah, we worked hard, but it wasn't like you hear or you see in the movies where it's, they never see the light of day. They're always in a warehouse somewhere and they're just completely shattered. I do believe you weren't a number efficient. I've heard some of that in other firms.
Which is great.
It is great. It was great. It was a great place to learn the practice of law.
Do you remember the first big or meaningful case that you were attached to?
Yes.
And
Can you talk?
did it
Can you
change
talk
anybody's
about
life
it?
for the better
I
or
can.
not?
No, I absolutely can. I absolutely can. I was a second-year associate. And by that time, I had figured out how to turn the damn computer on and start writing sentences with nouns and verbs in a way they wanted me to. But it was a case called Biogen versus Burlex. I mean, Biogen is now known as Biogen IDEC, but Burlex I think is still around. I haven't kept track of that, but it was a case involving the expression of a protein called interferon beta for a multiple sclerosis drug. And Biogen's drug was called Avonex. I forgot the Burlex product, but Burlex was suing. I believe Burlex was suing our client, and so there was. I remember this so well, is because the senior associate and the partner that were involved in that case were phenomenal teachers. In such a way, they allowed me over the course of the case to do things that second-year associates just don't typically get to do. And one of them is something called a deposition. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's where you sit a witness down. Yeah, you've probably seen it on TV and stuff, but it's where you sit a witness down and you swear them in and you ask them questions as if you were in court. And the whole point of that is to learn about the case, test your theories, but also to have that written record. So when you get to court, you can use that document if necessary. And here I am as a second-year associate sitting down with the head of marketing for Burlex to talk about some of the damages issues in the case and get this valuable information over a case that a product that was hundreds of millions of dollars of value for both sides. And I was terrified about all this.
You're 27 or 28 at the time?
I'm physically over that many times around the sun, but really at that point, I think I'm like 15 years old. I have no business. And I literally started making up words during the course of the deposition. I had a friend of ours, there was a partner at the firm who was actually from my own hometown, had no involvement in me getting hired, but knew me and my family very well. And he was rather large man. And so he would whisper or try to whisper to me to ask like an appropriate question. But of course, he was so significant that he couldn't actually lean over to me. So he would just say the question. And at one point, I'm just looking at him. Clearly, the witnesses heard the question from him. And I just said, can you just answer his question? Can we just not?
Quick kabuki dance.
Yeah, come on, just answer this question. I think the word I used the most times, I made up the word, was disregardless. Disregardless of that fact, sir, could you please? And over and over and over and over again. And I learned, and that the first time an associate takes a deposition changes their lives. You are never the same person after that experience. And it's exponentially different after that. As a litigator, having gone through your first deposition, the industry now knows, okay, somebody has said you're good enough to take a deposition. And so you're going to get your second and your third. And there's still a lot of firsts. There's the first inventor. There's the first expert. There's the first, this and that. But my career took off after that first deposition, regardless of how badly I did it.
A couple of questions on that. One, The first question will be, so how long were you over at Fish and Neve for?
Almost 8 years, 7.5, 8 years. They merged with a firm called Ropes and Gray. And by then, a very well-known Boston firm. And so by then, a lot of my mentors had left for a variety of reasons. And so I moved over to a firm called Wilmer Hill.
When you do depositions, obviously you are speaking to people of many different levels, whether it be the head of marketing, someone in research, someone in tech, etc. How much of your knowledge, let's say, extra knowledge do you then have to gain along the way? Meaning, obviously you know the law, but if you're going to speak to someone about marketing or about specific tech patents or anything of that level, how much extra knowledge do you need to bring to the table? Like, do you need to become a quasi-expert in whatever area of tech you're talking about, whatever area of bio you're talking about?
Absolutely. You absolutely need to do that. It is the depositions usually happen, or there's as the case progresses. You file the complaint, and the meat of a case, of an IP case, is what we call discovery.
Yeah,
it's where both sides are trying to figure out what's happening to the other side, and the vast majority of that, on the front end of that, is the exchange of documents.
right.
And so you fight about all the documents, making sure all the right documents have been produced, and then you review the documents. And after you've reviewed the documents, that's when the depositions usually begin to take place. So they happen usually at the end of fact discovery, or generally towards the back end of the fact discovery. And so you need to spend time with the documents. Or if it's a patent case, of course, the patent. You need to spend time potentially with your experts, understanding what the issues are. Where are we going with this? What are the themes? What are the theories? How are the facts lining up with all of that? And so when you get to the deposition, you have theories you're going to test. You have a pretty good sense of what their theories are. You're going to test them. And a good part of the deposition, though, continues to be good old-fashioned discovery. What I've seen the document, I see it says 1, 2, 3, but can you tell me about was one really how it went? And was there some gaps there that I don't know about? You're very much filling in a story, almost like coloring by numbers. And so the better lawyers will look at depositions and say, how I don't even know the numbers, and I certainly don't know how many colors there are. So I am here to try to paint as a fulfilled, complete picture within the time allowed as I can to understand what the situation was and how I might use that to bolster my theories and take down their own.
Your current field, which is more IP patent litigation here, which is, the notion of the cutting edge stuff that you're doing here. What was it that really then attracted you to this portion, or did you just make that natural move to it?
Well, certainly at Fish and Neve, I could have done more trademark work or more copyright work, but I really like the patent side a lot more, and even more than now than ever before.
What attracted you to that side?
The technology stuff. You call me a doofus. I call it, maybe a closet geek, but I'll geek out. I get very excited.
No, for that you're not a doofus. For that you're a nerd, but nerd with a good meaning.
Well, I'll embrace it wholeheartedly. I really enjoy learning about how our world works, about how our devices work, how our technology works, how systems, processes work, how pharmaceuticals work, what's happening next, how are we going to take this to the next level. I love all of that stuff. And so to be able to speak with people have spent their entire professional lives focusing on that one improvement, and I get to speak to all of these different people all the time throughout my career. It's really very exciting for me to be able to do that. And so I've spent a lot of time in the transportation side of things, but I have been exposed to a lot of other stuff. And so and some of them are really simple. Some of them are the carpet tiles that your chair might be rolling on right now. The express white strips was another fun case for me. Medical device stuff. I've done a lot of that. Certainly the small molecule life science stuff. But and to be able to rub elbows with these industry titans, it's hard not to pass that up. Hard not to pass that.
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about that aspect of it, because I really want to know how often you have to, hire somebody outside of the case, because you just need to learn about X, Y, or Z. You're saying you're rubbing elbows with people, and that's how you can get those answers. But Are they all involved with the case? Do you go outside of the case to get answers? The law is one thing, like Tushar is saying, but like figuring out the tech aspect of it, whether it is tiles or AI, has to be quite a bit of work, I would imagine.
Nobody can know everything, right?
Right.
Absolutely right. So the answer to your question is you absolutely go outside the case, but that's not unusual. So in every single patent case I've ever been involved with, and every professional has ever been involved with, there are experts that are hired for the purposes of that case by both sides. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two, sometimes it's many more. But these experts are hired primarily, or at least initially, they're hired for the possibility that they'll be testifying in trial on your client's behalf. And so you get those kind of experts, but you also have non-testifying experts who are there to kind of talk the questions through and to test the theories and to hear other information. And those are important roles that those experts play in making sure that what you want to say is technically accurate and is true. But the clients also are experts in the field. I mean, the inventors are at the client potentially, or the innovators are at the client, and they have a lot of colleagues there, and they have departments there, and so they are a massive resource also to be able to teach you, what the science looks like, what came before, what was the aha moment, and all of that to better understand where this is in the space. There's also a document. It's a really helpful document. It's the patent itself that is meant to describe things for the public. It might be the industry in which the technology sits, but it's meant for that industry to read and understand what the patent is. And so that helps you understand what the technology is. That patent identifies other materials that came before it as relevant to the technology. You can look at those. And at bottom, you kind of learn from the previous case, and you take the previous case information and you bring it to the next case, and you bring that to the next case. And so over time, you amass this amount of knowledge that you kind of roll up to the next case that helps you learn or know first and learn how to ask the right questions moving forward. So all that's part of the mishmash that happens.
With the type of work that you do, you are at the forefront of many different types of movements from a technology standpoint. You're involved with the future of cities, AI, self-driving cars. I mean, the type of work that you're doing is fascinating. As you look at the landscape of the types of things that you're touching, what do you find most compelling right now in terms of where we're headed? I don't want to say as a society, but what are some of those technologies and breakthroughs that you see coming in the near term?
In the near term, well, certainly the shift from internal combustion engines to electrical vehicles is a huge shift that's taking place in the car industry. So that's one. And the advent of artificial intelligence and how robust it is now, and generative AI, and where that's taking us in so many different industries is another easy number. It's not number two, but another one that's just incredibly interesting and scary to many, many people, and should scare us in some ways, but also is just a wonderful addition to our technological storehouse. So I'm excited about that. As we talk about more about the cities, and all these things kind of begin to interrelate. How AI helps cars, the developer of cars, developer of energy, the management of energy, the developer of batteries, the mining industry, and the finding of where these minerals should be. Where do we find these minerals, and how do we harvest them from the earth? AI is touching on all of that. And as you I like to think of things as cities, because as you look through the home of the individual and that experience all the way through, getting the person to work and back again, and all the water that's required, and electricity that's required, and parks that are required, and shopping that's required, and all that kind of fits within a city and makes it easier to talk about and digest. But we're changing as a species, the way we're thinking about our communities. And some of those communities are easier to develop because they're on open land. And some of our traditional cities are trying to figure out how to kind of quote unquote retrofit themselves to take on these technologies as quickly as they can, realizing that they've already got infrastructure and it's hard to build on top of it sometimes. But the cities that are literally the cities of tomorrow, you hear about NEOM in Saudi Arabia, these really interesting cities in Tokyo, Indonesia, Malaysia, just fascinating approach to China, lots and lots of things happening in China. These cities are kind of next gen thinking, not only the application of technologies, but how we interact with each other as a community. And that is wildly exciting, I think, for all of us. And it'll impact us, I think, in a very positive way in many, many respects. And it's, also in a way, there's the kind of the dark side of all this change. And we need to manage how it will impact jobs and how do we manage those people that are now in a traditional IC, kind of an internal combustion engine job, realizing that that industry is going to change pretty dramatically. The trucking industry is under tremendous stress. Largest employer in the United States, if not the world, is the trucking industry. And they've got a huge demand problem. They don't have enough people to drive their vehicles. And so what about doing first mile, last mile, or some self-driving or drive-by-wire approach to these things that solve a lot of problems, but it could also put a lot of people out of work. A lot of people. And so how do we manage that as a society? How do our policymakers think about those issues? That's not an IP issue, but it's integrated. It's very interrelated to what IP is meant to do. And so what innovations will be brought to bear to be able to manage all of those problems? Well, you can see I'm beginning to geek out on this. I get very excited about these problems.
Couple questions, a quick one, and then probably a little longer one for you to answer. First one is, are you seeing technology now on the patent level from some of your clients that most of us won't see for the next 5 to 10 years?
No, you just because the patent is in the patent office right now doesn't mean that the technology is not going to be deployed.
Right.
So people are inventing things right now and deploying it right now and in parallel filing for patents. There are some things that might take a little longer because the R&D cycle takes longer, but that has nothing to do with their patenting system. It's just that R&D takes time.
Okay. Second, you mentioned that Fish and Neve was a boutique firm, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that Crowell Mooring is a large firm. It's a true large firm.
Well, we would characterize that as boutique is kind of one practice area,
right?
And Crowell Mooring is a multi-practice area firm,
multi-practice
practice firm.
So, which do you think is better in terms of, let's say, the overall career path? Going the boutique route or a multi route as you are now currently in your position. Is there an advantage or a disadvantage between the two?
Yeah, well, there are definitely pluses and minuses between the two. I think there was a time when I first started that the patent boutique firms, there were many of them. Patent law was not very well known back then. I don't think the industry generally understood how much money was being made in that industry. The geeks, as we were called, you just leave them off in the corner. That's not the type of law I ever want to practice. And so we were pretty much left alone. Over the course of time, and it was really driven by some of the economics of the larger firms who began to hire some of the best and brightest in their industry. They learned about what the patent litigation industry looks like, and got very interested in getting in the game and applying their trial litigation skills to the patent litigation space. And so they got in the game. I think so that as a business proposition, it became almost impossible for a boutique firm to continue on in large cities, large regions where a lot of laws it takes place. So in New York City, it's hard to be a boutique patent firm, for example. It might be easier in a different community where there's different things are happening in that region, but certainly in the what you call the law hubs of the United States, very challenging to be a boutique firm. The benefit of it, of course, is all of you are speaking the same language. You're all focused on that area. You're all focused on that business plan. You're all focused maybe on those set of clients and their technological needs, and you're able to bounce ideas off of each other and create BD business development campaigns, and it's all one big happy family, and that's great. And there's a lot to be said for that. That's the growth. That's the environment I grew up in, and I learned a lot in a very short period of time. The GP firms, though, you can still have a lot of patent people around, a lot of IP people around. So you can kind of continue on that communal experience, but you can also learn from other practice areas. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, one. But two, there's a lot of cycles in the law. This year might be a big corporate year. Well, the next year might be a big product liability litigation code. There are a lot of ups and downs in the different practice areas of the law. And so if you have a lot of different practice areas, law firms can kind of take those ebbs and flows and even them out. And that, of course, financially takes a lot of pressure off the individual lawyers. Or if you're in a boutique firm, if that industry is down, oh boy, there's a lot of stress in that firm.
Okay, real quick. Best
Yeah.
part of being a lawyer, worst part of being a lawyer. Because you see, I can tell you love it. I mean, you can just
I
tell the
really
way you
do.
talk about it. You
Well,
really love it. I know you do.
That's why I struggle.
Can you take
Yeah.
longer to answer this question?
What I love about the law, what I love about the law is I am in a position to help to understand my clients' problems and help them reach their whatever goals they have, including solving some of their problems and monetizing some of their assets. I'm in a position to help them do that, and it makes me feel more than a lawyer, but a business partner to them. And it's that where I also get to practice law and have fights and the best part. Okay, the best part of that is helping our clients achieve their goals. But when you have a third party like a judge or a jury say you're right, that is a very unique high in any industry.
Validating, sure.
It's fantastic. Of course, the opposite is horrifying and can cost you years of your life. When you win an issue or a case, it is an incredible highlight. So that's those two things are the best parts.
So that's the best part and the worst part, right there. They agree or they don't.
Yeah.
That works.
Well, the worst part is that it's a service industry, and so no matter what I do, there are only 24 hours in the day that I can offer my clients. I can't multiply. There's no factory that I can say, let's build another factory, make another million widgets. And so the margins that I can command on each hour, even if I get associates and I keep, put that leverage system in play, that only gets you so far. And they only have 24 hours. So, and of course you can't work anybody 24 hours for any extended period of time. So that puts economic pressure on firms to deal with hourly rates and hourly billings and all of that, kind of the business of law, the economics of law, which I think is frankly it is the worst part in my view of the law, is that mechanism of how we value our time. Instead of valuing a solution or a project or an approach, which we're not quite there on and figuring that all out, we pay for our time. And that's, I think, the worst part of what I do.
For a young person at the beginning of their career journey who is trying to figure out how to make the best use of their time, and if you had advice for somebody who wanted to follow a similar path, what would you tell them?
Don't do it.
No, I wouldn't tell them that. I wouldn't tell them that because frankly, if I'm crazy enough to do this, I want a lot more crazies to join me in the process too. So I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. So no, I don't want that. So it's been a wildly rewarding career. And I knock wood that I've got years to go. But the advice I would give a young associate is, demonstrate your willingness and ability to learn outside of the curricula that you're dealing with in law school. Absorb as much as you possibly can about artificial intelligence and what's happening in that industry, from learning how to code, at least rudimentary code, to understanding their algorithms themselves. Certificate courses, just gobble that up, because this is a tool that they're undoubtedly going to have to learn. And they are likely to be in a position to know more about it than people a generation or two ahead of them. So to be experts in that sooner will just be so much better for them. And then if you're saying this person wants to follow an IP route, what is your passion in that space? Do you like the cosmetic industry? Do you like the fashion industry? Do you like more trademark stuff? Do you like AI so much that you're really more of a copyright, soft computer science person? You're going to follow that route. Or are you looking to be more of a hardcore technologist, engineer, biochemist, physicist, that kind of stuff? And what is it then? Where is your industry passion? What is it? Did you build a car? No, I didn't build a car when I was a young kid, but I distinctly remember my mom telling me when I was young, I think people are telling me I should buy an old engine and let you take it apart and put it back together, take it apart, put it back together. She never did that because she realized it'd probably blow the house up. But that would have been fun. That would have been a lot of fun. Are you that kind of person? Are you that kind of person that's tinkering with things, putting things together, painting for gold in the backyard, whatever it might be, that industry, take that, use that.
Yep.
Develop.
Find a passion within the space.
Yes, that's right. That's right. You see why use 1,000 words when one will do, but yes.
Well, that is actually a perfect setup for where I was headed next to close out our really fascinating conversation, which is your podcast. So I mentioned it off the top. You have a podcast called And Motion.
Right.
Tell us about it.
Sure. So I'm this is my third podcast in the space, but Kroll, Kroll ampersand, Kroll in motion. So that's where the And Motion podcast came from. This is a podcast that seeks to address all things transportation related. So it's not just IP issues; it's everything within the space, legal issues and technical issues and business issues in the space. And I've forgotten the number of casts that we've had now it was launched this year, so probably around 7, 8, or 9. And we have guests from all over the industry come in and talk about their particular company, what they're addressing in the industry, what they're seeing come down the pike, as well as some of my colleagues getting on to talk about, some of the legal issues. And we have experts come on and talk about their, whatever the business or other issues are. But it's an opportunity for listeners to hear about the space and to continue to geek out, so to speak, about what is happening in a critical part of what is the human experience is transportation. And so we try to bring a lot of information to the fore that's happening in the space at a time where, frankly, there's a bit of a revolution going on, and there are fits and starts to it, to be sure. It's very much underway technologically, and the geopolitical issues that surround it now are like never before. And so it's an interesting time to be the host of the And Motion podcast.
I got to tell you, let me just, before we wrap it up here, I never thought I'd be into the subjects you talk about. And yes, obviously I know who you are, so it makes me want to listen to it a little bit more. I find your podcast really interesting, Paul. I really, really do.
Agreed.
Very nice.
I really.
Well, I try to take your voices and take your voices down a little, like another octave, and slow down. Welcome to the And Motion podcast.
Exactly.
Well, I listened to your opening. You were great.
Liven it up a little bit.
Sure.
You've had 8 episodes. I think you've had 8 episodes. The only one I wasn't able to get into was one where you talked about like government torts. That one I couldn't do. The rest, I love.
I get it. But for that one person within that industry who needs to know, I think it was actually.
Oh my God, they're gonna love it. They're gonna love it.
The tax issues are like, this. Some of these issues are tougher than others, to be sure. But for the people that need to know that stuff, oh boy, they need to know that.
Courses for courses.
I never thought I'd find it so interesting. I really find it interesting.
That's great.
So, Paul, I want to be sure that everybody can find your podcast. So is it on every possible platform? Where can people discover this?
Well, certainly they can go to the Kroll and Mooring website, or even just a general web search and put in Paul Keller, ampersand, and motion, ampersand motion, and they will find it. But it's all over the net. It's all over the different platforms that
Apple and all the other platforms.
All that stuff. So it's all over the place. But the Kroll and Mooring website, And Motion, Keller, it will pop right up.
Perfect. Well, Paul, this conversation, I think I can speak for all three of us that we've learned a ton over the course of the past hour.
Great stuff.
And we are greatly appreciative that you spent the time with us.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I can absolutely represent that some of that actually was true, and so it's been my pleasure. It's my absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Run Paul. For office, Paul Keller. I will vote for you.
Is that next?
I'm not. So I'm in New Hope, Pennsylvania right now. The mayor of New Hope is a gentleman named Larry Keller. And when Larry Keller found out that Paul Keller lives in New Hope, there was the very quick suggestion by him that I should run for mayor of New Hope, for the simple reason that he wants to be able to have
name recognition.
Keller for Keller.
Keller.
That's it. That was the whole.
Nice.
That may be the beginning.
Nice.
Paul, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the time.
So that was Paul Keller, who has undoubtedly proven that the law and litigation and patents and all of those things can be absolutely fascinating. What a great storyteller he is. Tushar, thank you so much for bringing him to us.
My pleasure, guys. That was fun, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so Paul and his passion for patents, which is a hard thing to say right off the bat, and an even harder thing sometimes for us to understand that, we all have obviously these, the computers that we use, the phones that we use, they all have to come from somewhere. And it's guys like Paul who have helped to make those dreams come true for so many, whether it be companies or for individual business owners. It is fascinating to get into that world of being a futurist in some ways, right? You're looking at technology for the future today and helping those folks who are essentially trying to implement these technologies in the safest way possible for all of us to use. I really enjoyed listening to his journey from when I was in college to when I went to law school to what it means then to get into the world of corporate legal work. And it is kind of fascinating to see that you will do a lot of career jumping throughout your time when you're working. And if you're able to kind of find that little niche for yourself, heck, you're going to make a real career out of it. And he's been super successful at it.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word passion there, T. I thought his advice was really on point. Just find your passion first and foremost. And he has it. But then using your passion, right? And really finding out exactly what you want to do within the industry. It's not enough to just say, I want to be a lawyer. Like, there's so much in there that you could possibly do in terms of law. And I think Paul Keller's a great example of a guy who didn't really know, but then found out exactly how he wanted to use his law degree and his law skills. And look where it's brought him. So, listen to Paul's advice. Find your passion. Use your passion and find out exactly where you want to use that passion with whatever career field you're talking about, because it really works for anything, right? If you don't have the drive, you're not going to do anything. But once you have that drive, find out how to really hone in on it and use it like a laser, because that's what Paul Keller did.
Absolutely. And, for me, one of the key takeaways was, if you're a small guy out there who has an idea, has a vision, and you've created something that you want to bring forward, there are people like Paul in the world who have your back and can defend you. I've worked in business, obviously, for a very long time, and I've seen many situations where a small company has a great idea and they brought it forward, and the behemoth has said, not on my turf, no way, no how, and they will out-litigate the small guy who's trying to break in. And there are so many instances of little companies disappearing because they just can't survive those legal battles. Well, as Paul talked about, there are associations that are set up now, and there are ways to find funds to help you fight that battle. And people like Paul will do that for you, which is critically important. And it's just good to hear that there are people out there looking out for the little guy. So with that, Paul Keller, thank you so much for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. Be sure to check out his podcast and Motion. On behalf of Tushar Saxena, Larry Shea, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. Please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and to give us a great review if you enjoyed this and other stories. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X, or visit our website at nowrongchoices.com to sign up and become a part of our community. Thanks again for tuning in, and always remember, there are no wrong choices on the path to success, only opportunities, because we learn from every experience.